Welcome to Real Dose Radio with Dr. Steve Siskind.
Hello everyone, it's Dr. Steve Siskind here, and welcome to the Real Dose Health and Wellness Podcast. I hope you're all having a great week and a super healthy one. And today we're going to talk about menopause, and what it is, how you can manage it naturally, and we're here with Dr. Aviva Romm to talk about it. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Romm and why we're so honored, and it's such a special treat for us to have her here to talk about this really important topic. So I'm going to read her bio to you so you understand who she is and why she's maybe more qualified than most people on the planet to talk about this, and then we'll welcome Dr. Romm to the show. So Dr. Romm is a Yale-trained, board-certified family physician, midwife, herbalist, and award-winning author. She's an international authority on botanical and functional medicine for women and children. She has 30 years of clinical experience and is the author of 7 books on natural medicine, including Botanical Medicine for Women's Health, winner of the James A. Duke Award. So Dr. Romm combines her medical and midwife backgrounds to guide women in transforming their health and their lives, and to do so also for their kids. She's a leader in the revolution to shift the current medical system into one that respects the healing capacities of the body and nature, and that's something that I talk about a lot. It's so important, such important work. She is an adjunct assistant clinical professor in the Department of Family Medicine at Tufts School of Medicine. She's on the advisory board of the Yale Integrative Medicine Program. She's the medical director of the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, I think I'm right saying all these things correctly, and sits on the expert panel of the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook. And if that isn't all enough, she practices functional medicine at the Ultra Wellness Center with Dr. Mark Hyman, which may be probably is the leading and most famous functional medicine, natural health centers in the country, if not in the world, and Dr. Hyman is a world authority. So who better to have with us today than Dr. Romm? So Aviva, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. It's really fun.
Well, I'm really excited because what we've done here is we've gone out to our clients and customers to ask them what they would like to ask you. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So without any further ado, let's just sort of jump right into the topics. And let's start with menopause itself from a definitional perspective. What is it? What is menopause? What's happening in a woman's body during this phase of her life? And what are the kinds of symptoms that a woman would be experiencing who's going through menopause?
Yeah, so there's this period leading up to what is technically menopause. Menopause technically means you haven't had a period for 1 year. Plain and simple, that's it. And then after that 1 year mark, from then on, you're considered in menopause. But actually, there's even as many as 10 years leading up to that time in life, which for women on average around the world, the menopause happens between 51 and 52. Now, that's the average. So some women are a little later, and there are women who experience even what's called premature menopause. So that could even happen in the 30s and 40s, but that's more of a medical condition. But in our early 40s, a lot of us start, and to add one of my credentials is I'm perimenopausal too.
Okay, all right. So
that's another credential.
Which adds even more. That's probably the most qualifying of, right?
Exactly. You got to walk your talk.
Right.
So this 10-year period leading up to the perimenopause is where a lot of women start to have symptoms. Those can be things like initially changes in the length or frequency of our cycles. Sometimes our cycles come more often and heavier. Ultimately, they tend to start to phase out a little bit and get lighter and shorter. But during that time, women can have really heavy vaginal bleeds, especially if they've had fibroids or problems with too much estrogen in the past. Women often start to say they're not sleeping as well, waking up in the middle of the night, having a harder time falling asleep, sometimes having to wake up in the night to urinate because of more vaginal dryness and changes that are happening down there due to changes in hormones. Hot flashes during the day, which it may sound trivial, but actually it can be really significant. Women have come to me saying they've just had horribly embarrassing moments where they've gotten up in front of a board meeting or in front of a group of people and had to give a talk or just answer a question and just break into this horrible red flush and an embarrassing sweat. And then hot flashes that happen at night are called night sweats, and those can be terribly disruptive to sleep. Some women may have only a few hot flashes or night sweats during their entire perimenopausal period, but some women can have 12 or 15 or 20 of them throughout the day and night. So you can imagine you break into this sweat while you're sleeping. First, you get really overheated. Then you break into this sweat, you kick your covers off, now you're all sweaty and you're freezing cold. Then you have to get up and change your sheets or your bedding or your nightgown, and that is very disruptive to sleep. Because of the vaginal dryness, women can experience changes in their, not so much sexual drive, but their comfort and pleasure having sex. And when that goes down, sexual drive starts to go down, and those changes can also increase risk of urinary tract infections. So there's a broad range of what's happening. And the reason that's happening is essentially our ovaries have kind of said, okay, been doing this work, since you were 12 or 14 or 16, had enough. The estrogen starts to go down, the progesterone starts to go down. And when that happens, body tissue changes. The estrogen really is what makes women kind of curvy and juicy and makes us have that really nice, sex drive. And it just kind of makes our lives juicy. And when it starts to go down, some of our tissues get drier. Our mood can change a little bit. And then progesterone starts to go down too, and that can have a tremendous impact on sleep. Additionally, other things can have an impact, like decrease even in thyroid function that can start to affect how we feel. So there's a lot going on.
This is like a system-wide, it's a system-wide shift. It's a change.
Exactly.
It's more than just a word. Let's put it that way.
It is. And you mentioned physical changes, but there's a tremendous amount of sort of psyche transformation that's happening for women when you hit your mid 40s, late 40s, early 50s. Maybe your kids are grown if you have them and they're leaving the house. You've been with your partner maybe for a while, and you're just kind of realizing you're in this middle point in your life. And what's really interesting for women is as estrogen starts to go down and progesterone starts to go down, it's not so much that women's testosterone goes up, but it starts to be the more dominant hormone.
Right.
And so women can start to feel like some of the ambition that they've put under the table a little bit while they were raising kids is starting to surface. I find a lot of women telling me, and I'm experiencing it too, actually, things that we've tolerated in our lives where we were willing to be a little bit more polite and just accept things, whether that be something going on at work or something going on in the marriage or just in your life, a little bit more comfortable speaking up. And that can actually create some dissonance in your life if suddenly you're feeling a little less polite and a little more straightforward, which is a good thing.
Right, but it can change the dynamic across multiple relationships, including husbands and parents and siblings and all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So this is all great information. So let's dive in a little bit on a couple of these areas. One, and what I'm going to do is read off sort of some questions that we've gotten from folks. And the ones that I'm reading are actually, they're multiples. In other words, we got the same theme being asked over and over. So to me, that tells that these are areas that people are interested in knowing about. So in the area of weight gain and appetite, which is a general category, here's some of the kinds of questions that we got. So one is, and I'll just read them off and then you can sort of comment. One is, why is it so much more difficult to lose weight during and after menopause than it used to be? Another one is, I never had a weight problem until I reached my 50s. Why is that? So it's sort of related to that first question. What exactly is the reason for weight gain in the abdominal region during menopause? And another one, now that I'm in menopause, why has my appetite changed so drastically? So maybe you could sort of comment on this whole category of...
Sure. So one thing that's kind of interesting is to think about weight not from... Well, there's two ways of thinking about weight here. One is that there does tend to be a little bit of weight gain that happens in the menopausal time, and women will often say they gain just about 5 pounds without changing their diet or their exercise. And I like to look at sort of evolutionary biology, like what does nature intend? And we do know that women who are on the lower end of weight, maybe a little underweight or on the thin side, actually are more at risk for heart disease, just as much as women who are very overweight. heart disease because of decreases in estrogen, risk of fractures from bone density problems. If you're thinner, you tend to be making less hormones because part of where we make hormones is in our peripheral fat. And so there may actually be, I know this is a little bit, probably heretical to say.
Counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, or counterintuitive, but there may actually be, for women who are actually very thin and athletic, a little bit of benefit biologically to gain a few pounds to make sure that you're in a healthy weight range. So once you're in that healthy weight range, a BMI, somewhere between like 20 and 23, for example, you're probably in an optimally protected range and may actually be less likely to experience more drastic menopausal symptoms. So that's kind of something to think about. It may not always be a bad thing. Also, nobody wants to gain weight. You've been trim all your life or just, a good size, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, my body's out of control, my life's out of control, my hormones out of control. And I think a lot of women start getting anxious that they're just not as attractive at that age. Maybe their partners are going to start looking somewhere else if they're in that age. Like, there's all these sort of movie-generated images that we have of what might happen, which usually actually isn't the case. But we get anxious and we start to compare ourselves to women who are younger and in magazines and just have these unrealistic expectations. So we have to think about that too, like what are our healthy body image and how do we kind of flow with change and age. It's like we all want to live forever, but we never want to get older. Right. And so how can we kind of honor where we are?
Right.
Within that, we also know that some weight gain that does happen, especially around our middle, isn't optimal. And some of the reasons that happens are actually years of dietary habits that start to accumulate, years of just living on the planet. So some of our systems that we were more tolerant in, like our detoxification systems or our ability to control inflammation, just from years of wear and tear, start to take a little bit more of a hit if we're not taking care of those optimally. And if we haven't been following a really excellent diet, or if we have more inflammation or more chronic accumulation of environmental toxins just by virtue of living on this planet, right, then we start to develop problems like insulin resistance. And insulin resistance can make us, insulin is a storage hormone. So once our cells start to not be as receptive to letting sugar in, we tend to accumulate it and we store it in various ways, partly around our middle and partly as cholesterol. So that's a problem. And then also as we get older, our thyroid function can wane a little bit. So we know that women in 50s and 60s often have a slightly lower level of what's called TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. And thyroid is what's controlling the metabolism. It's sort of the pilot light that keeps our energy burning.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that it may not necessarily be that someone's going through the hormonal changes of menopause as much as just sort of you've been on the earth for a certain amount of years, and especially if you're not following maybe the optimal lifestyle, things start to catch up with you. So
yeah, another area along with that that I didn't mention is we have these amazing cells in our body called mitochondria, and mitochondria produce energy. And much like with our detox systems, those also maybe, if we're not nurturing them along, start to get a little less effective in their functioning. And then another thing that does happen because of hormone changes is we tend to shift from having more muscle mass to a little bit more fat mass. And again, maybe there's some biological reasons for that, but muscle mass burns more energy than fat, and it has more of those mitochondrial cells that like to fire up the energy. So as all of that goes down, we're kind of operating at a lower metabolic rate. So, a woman in her 20s who's relatively healthy sitting on the sofa is just going to burn calories faster than a woman in her 50s sitting on the sofa next to her.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that all makes lots of sense. So let's also talk about another area that we got most of our questions around, which is sort of the whole area of the brain related to mood and sleep. So I'll read a few of these off.
Before you get to that, do you want me to address the appetite one that you mentioned? I just remembered that.
Absolutely.
So just quickly with appetite, partly as our caloric needs start to go down, then, we're not burning as much energy, our body registers that as less need for calories. And so our appetite starts to go down a little bit. Also, as we get older, our stomach hydrochloric acid goes down a little bit. So adding things to the diet like apple cider vinegar before we eat, like even 1 tablespoon, or some betaine hydrochloride can bump up the stomach acid, and that can help with appetite too.
It's interesting. We talk a lot about apple cider vinegar with some of what we do. So good to
It's
know
so
we're on the same
natural and
page.
easy, yeah.
We get the I think it's the Bragg's with all it's like they call it the mother on the bottom. It's got like
that
the enzymes.
foamy, yeah.
It's
Looks like something's alive at the bottom.
Exactly.
Okay, brain stuff.
Yeah, so here's some of the questions on brain stuff. So one is I've noticed a decrease in clarity and brain function after menopause. Why? Another one is, could you please tell us about low-grade depression that seems to accompany menopause? And another one, like you mentioned before, about sleep. This person says, I used to sleep like a baby. Now I wake up several times a night and never feel rested. Why is that?
Okay, so the first one about clarity, mental clarity, and I'll tell you, a lot of my women patients come in talking about this phenomenon. We call it brain fog in the functional medicine world. And it's interesting, it's not just women in their perimenopausal years or menopause, it's women in 20s, 30s, 40s. It just seems to be a big problem. Part of that for women going through menopause is actually the decline in estrogen. We actually have estrogen receptors in our brain that partly help keep us sharp and clear. And women probably notice even in their cycles when they're not getting to menopause that your mental clarity is probably a little higher mid-cycle and a little less as we get toward our periods, partly because of that drop in estrogen right before our periods and during our periods. It's not a time where we necessarily want to do like higher mathematics.
Right, okay.
And similarly, when we get to perimenopause, those changes are happening. But I think that partly, we have expectations in our culture, like, oh, we get old, and so we don't function as well. And some of that may be true, but I think that some of that's just cultural expectation, and because we're all dealing with some of the same environmental insults, when we all get to the same age, we experience the same things, but it doesn't mean that that's actually a natural function of age. And so similar to the changes in our detoxification system and inflammation that can cause weight gain, we know that chronic inflammation can actually affect our mental clarity and cause that brain fog. Also, when there's blood sugar imbalances and insulin resistance, or women aren't eating as well and not getting adequate protein, or maybe too much grain and carbohydrates instead of protein, we're just really not feeding our brains optimally, and we're getting this kind of side effect of inflammation, and that's really what's affecting mental clarity. So one of the things I do just sort of automatically in my practice is make sure that my patients are keeping their blood sugar steady through the day by getting regular meals, high protein, good quality fats, and doing things that bring down inflammation, whether that be getting better exercise, reducing stress, getting antioxidants in their foods and in their supplements. And stress is a huge one. So as we reach our middle years, often our parents are starting to, and I see this all the time, my patients come in, they're in their 50s, maybe through their late 50s, early 60s. Their kids are transitioning off to college. They're going through these tremendous physical changes in their own body as women, and then their parents are starting to age. Maybe their kids are going through things, their parents are going through things. So you think, oh my gosh, like I'm finally grown up and I'm finally, getting to a place where my life is financially secure and my career is going well. But like all this stuff in life starts to happen. And that cognitive stress just from high cortisol, again, insulin resistance, can have a tremendous impact on actually the way the brain works, the actual neurocircuitry, the immunologic function that's happening throughout the body that's perpetuating inflammation in the brain. So finding techniques that help bring down stress and finding supplements that help bring down inflammation and support stress is hugely important.
So I'm sort of hearing this recurring theme that these things are happening, but it may not necessarily be because of the exact hormonal changes of menopause. It's just life, we're all sort of at certain phases at a certain age, we're going through similar things, and there's stresses and there's accumulations of maybe bad habits and other things that just need to be dealt with.
Yeah, and environmental exposures that, when you're 2, you've only had 2 years of it. When you're 50, you've now had 50 years of it. And I don't want to underestimate the value or the importance that the decline in hormones does make. So we do have estrogen receptors in our brain, and as that estrogen goes down, we do have to compensate with other healthy lifestyle choices and supplement choices and things like that. So there is a change that's happening, but we can compensate for it and we can mitigate it.
Which is the good news. So ultimately, it's a good news, right?
Absolutely.
You're not destined to.
You're not. Right? You're not.
Which we're going to get to. We'll get to that in a moment. We'll get into more detail on the approach.
Yeah.
But I want to ask one other question, which this came up, it's funny, it's like 2 or 3 times, and I sort of condensed it into a single question, but I sort of call this the jealousy question. So in other words, a few people said, why do some women never experience any menopause symptoms? They just seem to stop their monthly cycle and that's it. In other words, it's sort of like, they don't have to, like, how is it that some people have to go through all of this, hardship and others just skate through? Right.
It's a little bit like that fantasy woman who really does exist, who always looks perfectly fit, never exercises, and eats whatever she wants. I mean, there are people who just sort of have Amazonian genes, and they seem to manage. They just have these great genes. But for most of us, we've kind of been brought up in a similar culture where we have social expectations around menopause. We do know that in different cultures, some women don't go through menopause. And in cultures where menopause is actually not associated with miserable symptoms, interestingly, women tend to experience fewer symptoms, which is kind of interesting, right? Also, we know that women in certain cultures where the diet, for example, is more predominantly vegetarian and more predominantly plant-based, tend to go through much fewer symptoms than women in our culture. So we know that there are dietary factors and sort of internal expectation factors. And then again, some of us just have more robust detoxification systems. Some of us have had just better lifestyle habits coming along where we've had better diets or better exercise patterns. Some people are just better sleepers than others. Again, probably because of that detoxification, some people are able to metabolize and eliminate stress hormones better than others. So for example, some people just don't tolerate coffee, right? They get heart racing, they get low blood sugar, and often it's those same people who don't tolerate stress really well, or maybe who can't sit through a scary movie or would never go on a roller coaster. Whereas other people find those things rather amusing and just laugh their way through. You'll often find a correlation between those people having more anxiety, more menopausal symptoms than the others. So again, that comes down to our inherent ability to detoxify.
Sorry, I just had to turn my lamp on because
it's getting dark
here. So forgive me. Sorry.
No problem. I can see it's getting dark behind me too.
Block the camera there for a minute.
Yeah. And you asked about sleep before too, because I know this is just such a huge issue for women. And when progesterone goes down, it has a huge impact on sleep. And one of the few times that I actually will use hormone replacement therapy or bioidentical hormones is for women who are having just a miserable time sleeping. And the reason for that is when sleep goes, everything else is just miserable and amplified. Pain is worse. We have much poorer insulin resistance. We can't cope with stress as well. And lack of sleep actually can make us even gain weight. So women who are sleeping more poorly in the menopause or perimenopause are going to be the ones who are more likely to put on 5 or 10 pounds. It's just that function of higher stress in the system. So working on sleep for a woman who's having sleep disruption is probably one of the most important things I do around the menopausal time.
Great. So let's get into a little more detail on how you approach it. You've already sort of hinted at some of the things that you do when you have folks walk into your clinic. So sort of high level, what would you say is your approach to helping women in menopause? And sort of sub questions to that, again, from some of our clients, what can women do to lessen the effects of menopause in their bodies? And some people ask, this was funny, like 3 or 4 people said, can I just skip this altogether? Can I just fast forward? So what's your approach? How do you
Yeah, so getting back to this sort of cultural issue, I really do take kind of a meta approach, and really good functional medicine or really good integrative medicine puts mind body at the center of our awareness. What's happening, how we think about things, emotional responses to things does actually have an impact both on our biochemistry, but also on the choices that we make. So one of the first things I want to get clear with women on is, how do you feel about being perimenopausal? What's going on in your life? How's your marriage? How's it going with your kids? How are your parents? Are you in a caretaker role for anybody right now? And are you getting time for yourself? And so that's something that I really want to get out on the table right away. And the other thing that's really important is if she's not getting time for herself, she's not going to be able to implement the other things that she needs to do, right? Making better food choices, doing time for better food preparation, exercise, or taking supplements. So I want her to get clear with where she's at and start to maybe reframe how she looks at menopause as a really powerful time in her life where she's free from some of the restrictions that she's had before and can start to really develop herself and let herself be free a little bit and fly free and explore her creativity.
So you're setting sort of a mental framework and giving people some liberty to live within it.
It's so important to embrace where we are in life and look at the benefits and the pros and the beauty of it. And it is where we are. So fighting against it's not going to change it. And I certainly wouldn't want to fast forward from 50 to 70 anyway. I want to be there. I want to be there.
Me too.
So so that's one thing. Then the next thing from kind of a high level approach is, as I mentioned, how is sleep? Because when sleep's out the window, everything else is not going to happen, right? She's not sleeping well at night. She's going to wake up. She's going to have that coffee in the morning. That's going to affect her blood sugar and inflammation. Not saying coffee is a bad thing at that age. It can actually be beneficial, maybe 1 cup a day for cognitive function and inflammation, interestingly. Some new data coming out on that. But if she's going to the coffee because she's already fatigued, that sets a tone. Then maybe she's had the coffee, so she's skipping breakfast. Right. Maybe it causes a little bit of bowel irritation, and so that's off. And then we know that when we're tired, we tend to grab for more sugary things because it's giving us quick energy. So I want to get to that sleep really quickly. And so I work with women on a few aspects of that. One, what's keeping her up at night? Are there actually things that she's worrying about? So I actually created this little exercise that I have my patients do, and I call it a worry journal. And I literally have them get like a cheap notebook, like you can do like a, spiral little 79-cent notebook or $1.29 notebook, and sit somewhere that's not in your bedroom. Like go to your kitchen counter or a desk or just a chair somewhere in your house. And maybe about a half hour before you get ready for bed, write down everything that you're worrying about. Just mental download. It doesn't have to be articulate. It doesn't have to be publishable. Just do like a mental brain.
It doesn't have to be a blog post.
No, just a brain dump, And then on the back of that page, write down your to-do list for the next day, the kind of thing that you'd be laying there in bed thinking, getting ready to go to sleep, and you're like, oh shoot, I got to take the dogs tomorrow. I got to pick up the dry cleaning, like all those kind of things. So then when you're laying there in bed, and after you do that, like go take a shower, go do 5 minutes of meditation, and just kind of leave that behind energetically. So then when you do go to bed, you can kind of remind yourself, okay, I've already done the work of worrying. I kind of liken it to Weight Watchers. You get 30 minutes of worry calories and you're done. So that's an important thing. And
you're sort of making it into a habit rather than having it take up all your mental energy, right?
Exactly. And there is some evidence that writing things down does take them out of our brain, and it takes them out of our worries, like that mental loop we get in.
Right.
And then what I recommend is a practice that's pretty well known. People can look on the internet, just look up sleep hygiene. But sleep hygiene basically means that you're paying attention to the time period before you go to sleep, not just when you're laying there trying to go to sleep. So in a sense, you're sort of like, you're sort of powering down your own inner machine in a way. You're quieting yourself down. So in the 30 minutes before bed, nothing stimulating. I tell women don't have anything to drink for about an hour before bed because a lot of women are going to get up at night to pee, and then they can't go back to sleep.
Right.
So don't do that. And then either read something relaxing, do some restorative yoga. People can go on Yoga Glow or something like that online and plug into a restorative yoga, or better to not even be on the computer screen in the half hour before bed. Shut down all the electronics. Don't check email, don't check your phone, and don't watch TV. If you're going to read I basically say bed is for sleep and sex. Mm-hmm. That's it. So once you get into bed, or reading something really relaxing but not stimulating. And then botanicals and supplements can have a huge impact on sleep. So some of the ones that have the best data behind them, the best scientific research for sleep are valerian, passion flower, and hops. Lemon balm also. So those are probably the top 4 for sleep. Passion flower, lemon balm, valerian, and hops. Any of those can be used by themselves, or any of those can be used in combination. And I usually recommend don't drink a tea, because again, you have the same problem of fluids before bed, but you can do a liquid extract or take capsules. And lots of companies out there on the market have wonderful combinations of a variety of those. And they're all completely, perfectly safe, even if someone is taking a sleep medication or an anxiety medication. The only caution for any of those is hops is a little bit estrogenic. It's one of the very few herbs that actually is a little bit estrogenic. And so if a woman has a history of estrogen-related breast or other cancer, then I say skip the hops for her. But otherwise, perfectly safe.
I noticed one thing you didn't include on that list was melatonin.
Yeah, so supplements are also, I kind of separate herbs and supplements.
All right.
So melatonin is fantastic, anywhere from 3 to 6 milligrams before bed.
Okay.
It can be helpful, but a lot of people say they don't find great relief with it, so it's not necessarily the top of my list.
Okay.
But one that I actually do really, a couple that I really do like are magnesium. If a woman's having trouble with constipation, then I usually recommend magnesium citrate, anywhere from 300 milligrams, even up to 800 milligrams before bed. And if she's not having any trouble with constipation, around the same dose of magnesium glycinate. Very relaxing, also fantastic for people who have leg cramps or restless leg at night. L-theanine is another one that's fabulous, and then L-tyrosine. Both of those are just amino acids, so they're the same, they're what's in our proteins, and those can help people relax, calm down, and sleep. And again, there are some companies that do product combinations where they'll combine some of the botanicals and some of the herbs.
It's a great list, but coming from you, it's even greater, because a lot of times, you'll go on the internet and you'll see all of these names that you just sort of listed out, and people get very confused. Like, you just listed 8 or 9 things, like which ones, but having it come from you, it's sort of more validating to folks, I think, to give them guidance, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's what I really use for my patients. And one of the things that people will read about on the internet for mood and sleep and just relaxation is B-complex. And B-complex is fabulous. But I would say probably 7 out of 10 people say if they take it in the evening or before bed, it makes them wired. So B-complex can be great, but take it in the morning, not in the afternoon.
That's the stuff they put in all those energy drinks at like mega doses, right? So there's probably a reason for that.
Yeah.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition.
Sure.
And I want to hear more about supplements too. We'll get to that too. But this is, to me, this is sort of one of my passions. What drives me is, how nutrition, lifestyle in general, but nutrition specifically, how it can be used in many aspects of life. But in the role of dealing with menopause, are there certain nutrient-dense foods or specific kinds of foods or ways of eating that people should be thinking about when they're going through menopause and thinking about how to reduce their menopause symptoms?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is eating regularly and consistently, starting the day with a good breakfast, having a good lunch a few hours later, having a good dinner. And when I say good, I mean whole foods. Doesn't always have to be organic. I understand that can be expensive, but if you're going to not eat organic, look at a website like the Environmental Working Group, and at least look at the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Those are good guidelines of which foods you really should eat organic. And generally, that's your meats and your dairies and a few of the few produce that tend to be highly contaminated. So protein, good quality protein, about the size of, kind of like the palm of your hand is a reasonable guideline for a piece of meat or chicken or fish. A vegetarian diet or a plant-based diet can be really great, but it can also be very high in calories or high in carbs. Even beans and legumes are significantly carb-based. So if someone is trying to lose weight or has a lot of bloating or gas, that might not be optimal. In which case, either fewer grains as we go through menopause, or having them more as a complement than a pile of rice or a pile of pasta. And then a lot of vegetables, and especially leafy green vegetables, are great for the digestion. They're great for eliminating excess environmental hormones through our gut. They're fantastic for the fiber that they contain, for keeping the gut flora healthy. And a healthy gut flora, which we didn't really talk about, is important for how we use our calories, believe it or not, and how we eliminate our hormones, and even they're part of the detoxification system. So that's really important. And then for fruit, a lot of women, I start to de-emphasize the amount of fruit, but focus on berries.
Right.
Berries are really rich in antioxidant. Again, check out the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 for which ones to eat organic. But you can really eat berries all year round, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, fresh or frozen. Frozen are just as nutritious as the fresh. So those are a great, rich source of antioxidants, vitamin C, just a ton of nutrients, and they're fresh and they're vitalizing and they're light and they're, they make everything just delicious. So those are some of my big recommendations, and then good quality fats. We know that getting adequate olive oil, for example, in the diet, like 2 tablespoons of olive oil a day, reduces the risk of a first heart attack by like 80%. In fact, olive oil is one of the only foods that the FDA actually lets olive oil companies make a claim that this can reduce your risk of heart disease.
Right.
But not only that, healthy fats keep up our energy. They keep our, women, like nobody wants to get wrinkly. And if you ever notice, it's women who are really, really thin that tend to look more wrinkly than women who are a little bit plumper, actually. And you can kind of balance that. You don't necessarily have to get plump if you don't, that's not your body type or you don't want to. But having good quality fats can really keep down the wrinkles, keep our hair healthy.
And I think this whole, everything you just listed is spot on. It's exactly, what I tell people.
Yeah, did I miss anything there?
No, I think you got it.
Nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds,
right?
Yeah.
But like for me, I think one of the things, the questions I get back from a lot of folks as well, but fats are going to make me fat. It's sort of this idea that fats are, quote, bad. I think it's maybe left over from misinformation from the last 30 to 40 years.
Yeah.
You could speak to
Well,
that.
I think it's 2 things. I think you're right. It's misinformation. We know that low-fat diets are not healthier. Well, I say it's 3 things. So it's misinformation. There's a misunderstanding of what low-fat means. So, for example, people tend to think if it's low-fat, you can eat more of it. There was actually a study done where 2 different groups of people were given a plate full of the same exact food. And then one group was given on that same plate 2 crackers, and they were told that the crackers were low-fat crackers.
Right.
And that entire group actually ate more and gained more on the exact same plate of food, because in their minds, well, if it's low-fat, it must be healthier and lower calorie.
Right.
It's kind of the same phenomenon we see when people go gluten-free and they get all these gluten-free products and they go crazy on them.
Right.
Because somehow in their minds it's healthier, and then they start gaining weight or having other digestive problems than the gluten problems. So that's one thing. If people are thinking low fat and then they're eating more low fat stuff, it's counterintuitive. And then the third thing is that not all fats are made equal. And this is probably the most important thing. So if people are eating unhealthy fats, like just conventional or commercial vegetable oils, or a lot of saturated fat or hydrogenated oils are especially bad, then they're not getting any of the benefit, and they're actually adding more what's called oxidative stress to their bodies, because those fats may be rancid or actually causing the body more demand. So the real key here is the kind of fat. It has to be really good quality monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fat. I think that you really can't beat olive oil, but walnut oil, sunflower oil, these are also avocado oil.
Just, olive oil is interesting because you have to be careful which olive oil you get, because olive oil is not all what it seems. Some of it is adulterated, some of it actually isn't olive oil. It's getting complicated.
Yeah. It's getting so complicated.
Yeah, it makes it difficult.
And actually, I'm for people who are generally healthy, I am not opposed to butter either. Mm-hmm. And then coconut oil, which is a saturated fat, has a lot of medium chain triglycerides that can promote health, not take away from health.
Great.
So my experience is that eating good quality fats tends to keep people on the slimmer side, not the heavier side. Oh, and here's a fun fact.
Okay, I'm ready.
Here's a really fun fact. Women who eat a small amount of dark chocolate every day, 1 to 2 ounces, it has to be 72% or more to really be an antioxidant. But women who actually eat a small amount of chocolate a day have better mood, lower blood pressure, and tend to not gain as much weight, tend to be a little bit slimmer, partly because of the beneficial effects of the dark chocolate, and partly because allowing ourselves the freedom to eat something takes away the edge and the craving. So I consider dark chocolate a food group for women.
I've got some in my cabinet. It should be for me too, because I take it at night to sort of take that edge off, and I take 85% dark chocolate, and it works for me.
And for women who are really caffeine sensitive, maybe it's a good pick me up for like for that 3 o'clock in the afternoon slump. Right. Although if women are having that, you want to take a look at some of the adrenal function and make sure they're not adrenally stressed.
So I think on diet, you've like beautifully summarized sort of all the key dietary guidelines, not only for menopause, but I think for living a clean, healthy lifestyle that's going to help you with many disease states beyond menopause. Cancer prevention, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all these things, and what you described. So it's been really nicely summarized. But I'd like to move on to a couple other topics.
Yeah.
Because we're starting to run a little bit low on time, and I want to squeeze in a few other things. So
sure thing.
This is one that almost everyone asks about, which is, and you touched on it briefly before, but hormone replacement therapy.
Yes.
What's your viewpoint on it? There's estrogen replacement, progesterone creams. There's all kinds of debate around this, and fear mongering, and is it cancer causing? Is it not? I mean, where do you come in on this topic?
So I'm actually a little bit conservative in a way on it, in that while I do think bioidentical hormones, which are the ones that are more from natural sources, may be a little bit more tolerable by the body than the synthetic ones, I do tend to think that hormones are hormones, and we don't really know in the long run whether they're entirely safe for everyone. So I don't recommend them for everyone. I do look at what's going on individually and the severity of symptoms and a woman's personal history. So if a woman is having just horrible, intolerable symptoms of menopause that are just wrecking her quality of life, like she just cannot get to sleep, or she's having horrible vaginal dryness or chronic urinary infections from the vagina, just these kind of things, then I will try the other supplements that we've, some of the ones we've talked about, and some additional ones, and dietary changes and lifestyle changes. But I'll kind of set a time limit and say, well, how long do you feel like you can try this before we dive into some hormonal therapy? And I'll usually suggest that we try it for 6 to 12 weeks if she can tolerate it, because it sometimes takes that long to really build up some changes in the body with natural supplements. If after that time or during that time period, she just calls me up, she's like, Aviva, my patients call me, a lot of them call me, this is my first name, Aviva or Dr. Romm, I just can't take it, I'm going crazy, then I will talk about what we need to do. Hormone testing for women in their 50s and 60s isn't really that reliable, because there's no set amount of estrogen or progesterone that a woman should have at that time. When we do testing, we're supposed to see low numbers naturally. So do we want to get her numbers up to where she was when she was compared to like a 20-year-old or 30-year-old? So I don't necessarily do testing for that reason. I may do testing to get a baseline, so that once we start to add in hormones, we have something to compare to, and I don't want to get too high on my levels. If she's having a lot of vaginal dryness, a lot of urinary tract infections and discomfort in that region, I'll usually recommend a topical estrogen, either vaginally or on the skin. Because you're avoiding it through your digestive system, you're avoiding a lot of the problems that come from taking hormones. So your risk of cancer is a lot low. The risk of liver problems is negligible with topical application. So it's really quite safe. That said, I'm extra cautious with women who have a mother or a sister who's had breast or uterine cancer, or if she's had it, then that's a whole different story. But if she hasn't, then I'll use a topical low dose. I'll start with the lowest dose, and then I'll work my way up of just an estrogen cream. And in that case, I don't necessarily use estrogen and progesterone. The only time I really use progesterone cream is if I'm giving somebody oral estrogen and then I want to balance it out with progesterone cream if she still has a uterus, to reduce the risk of uterine cancer. But I don't find that the progesterone creams topically really help with things like sleep or mood. And that's where I will use what's called a troche. That's just spelled Troche.
Right.
And that's just a little wafer that you put in your mouth. And I'll start with 25 milligrams and work my way up to 50 to 100 milligrams just right before bed. And that I have found to probably be the most effective hormone replacement therapy that's a progesterone replacement therapy alone for women who are having just sort of those emotional or sleep-related symptoms.
Wow, it's great information, great summary, because it's very, very helpful for the folks listening. So,
and let me just add, when I do have women who have a uterus still, and they are on any hormonal therapy, that is one time when I do recommend get the appropriate annual screening from their gynecologist or primary care or me, and similar with mammograms.
And I think this points to what you've described as a very intimate doctor-patient sort of relationship that that you're working with people, and you have this knowledge, and you're working with folks who need that. It's not to have someone like you in your life is important. Let's put it that way. They're the right person to help you through this.
It really is. Although, honestly, it's very hard for people sometimes in the middle of nowhere, or even in some major urban settings, to find a woman who does integrative or functional medicine. So there are some good resources like the Institute for Functional Medicine, the Holistic Medicine Board, that you can look for people like me in your area. And then there are people like, I have a website, Sarah Gottfried, Christiane Northrup. There are a few of us out there who are providing information, because we want to make sure that people like you guys who are listening to me and Steve today can find that information if you don't have someone in your area.
Great. So let's, on the topic of sort of treatment, one other sort of area, you mentioned a bunch of supplements related to helping people sleep. Are there any others, like a lot of folks may have heard of black cohosh and other things that are purportedly helpful for other aspects of menopause? Could you maybe give a little primer on those other supplements for? Absolutely.
The two that I probably use the most, in addition to the ones that I've mentioned, are black cohosh is an excellent one. It's not hormonal. It's quite safe. It's very safe, and it appears to operate through actually one of our neurotransmitter systems called serotonin, which helps with mood. It used to be thought that it was hormonal, but it's really not. But because it's still helping with mood, much like some of the antidepressants are now given for women with menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, it works more like that. Very safe, non-addictive, and it can help with everything from sleep, hot flashes, and vaginal dryness to mood, little symptoms like headaches. So I will recommend it quite often, either in a liquid extract form or a capsule. And I just recommend dosing it based on whatever the recommendation is on that particular product. And then another one that I use a lot is called Vitex, or chasteberry, or chaste tree, or chaste tree berry. Those are all the same product, but different people label them differently. And that's also, much like black cohosh, been shown to help regulate hormones, but it's not hormonal itself, so you don't have to worry about that risk. And it can also help with mood, hot flashes, and vaginal dryness.
Great. Excellent. That's perfect.
And any of the ones I've mentioned can be used alone or in combination.
That's great. So I want to, since you're in the real world of seeing folks every day and helping them, would you be willing to maybe share like a case study, somebody who's come in, an example of a person who came in, maybe tell a little bit about that person, what you saw with them, what they were experiencing, how you helped them, and what what their results were, just to bring this into some concrete world.
So I was thinking about this actually recently, because I've just been kind of going through different cases and putting together some case histories for blogs and Huffington Post. And so one particular patient came into mind, partly because she was sort of like the menopause special. And we'll call her Claire. And Claire is in her early 50s, just an absolutely lovely woman. She's a little bit overweight, wants to lose some weight, struggling with constipation, has restless leg syndrome, and then just miserable time sleeping. Her cholesterol is a little bit high. Her blood pressure is great. And she's also experiencing some changes in her mood. But a lot of it is just that some of the changes that are going on in her body are getting to her. She actually noticed that she had been gaining weight and really hadn't changed her diet that much over the past few months. And was really stressing out a lot, just really worrying a lot. So I actually checked some labs on her, and found that her iron was a little bit low, and her vitamin D was very low. So low iron can actually affect your mood. It can make you feel restless. It can make you feel irritable. And it can affect your thyroid function too. And her thyroid function wasn't optimal. It wasn't abnormal, but it just really wasn't in the optimal. It was like on the range that's conventionally considered normal, but just not really optimal metabolism. So I put her on a vitamin D supplement, which interestingly, if there's one supplement that I would say all women over 50 should be on, regardless, it's vitamin D. Everybody should take at least 1,000 units of vitamin D3 every day. And the reason for that is that there have actually been very clear studies showing that not only does it reduce your risk of fractures from osteoporosis and developing osteoporosis because it helps us utilize our calcium, but it actually helps with balance and reduces our risk of falling. Wow. So I pretty much put every woman over 50 on at least 1,000 units. She was substantially low, so I put her on more like 4,000 units. And we decided not to start on any hormone therapy initially, but I put her on some supplements that help to support the hormones. So one, we started getting more iron-rich foods in her diet to support that, because you have to have good iron for your thyroid to function really well. I asked her to start including some Brazil nuts in her diet, just 2 Brazil nuts a day, provide all the selenium you need, and selenium is one of the key nutrients for thyroid function. And then I also put her on a supplement that had a little bit of boron, a little bit of selenium, some zinc, and I think that was pretty much what was in it, and just to support thyroid function. And I was going to have her do that for about 3 months, and then we were going to recheck her numbers, which did actually come up, and she was just feeling a lot better. For the constipation, I had her do magnesium before bed. And then for the high cholesterol, the constipation, and just for overall hormonal balance and good quality oils, I asked her to add in 1 tablespoon of flaxseed ground into her morning shake or to put on her salads every day. And there's been some really good data to show that even just 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed every day can reduce your cholesterol and also reduce your risk of developing diabetes, which is so important in our mid-50s, well, throughout our whole life. And then for the, she was having some hot flashes, just some general discomfort from menopause and sleep problems. I did actually add some melatonin for her, L-theanine, and then a combination that I use in my practice that has black cohosh, the Vitex, lemon balm, and valerian. Wow. So that was before bed. And then we didn't really touch on this, but she was experiencing a lot of vaginal dryness and some urinary tract infections. So I asked her to start cranberry D mannose, which is just a cranberry concentrate every day, and stay on that long term. And I added in a vaginal suppository that is, check this out, a probiotic. So I have actually, before I even start using any kind of hormones for women with vaginal dryness, I'm asking them to start taking an oral probiotic and using a vaginal suppository that I actually have compounded, but any pharmacy can compound it. And it's 60 milliliters of this acidic vaginal gel that Lactobacillus reuteri, Reuteri, is in it. And Lactobacillus reuteri is actually specific for helping restore vaginal flora. And you can take it orally and use it vaginally. You can do either or, but I usually do both. And that was just like a miracle turnaround for her. So within a few weeks, she was starting to feel a lot better just from optimizing her metabolism. I mean, just getting her bowels going and sleeping better. And then over time, the vaginal dryness improved too. So she was just an amazing she had all these different things going on. So
that's an amazing story. And I think also important to note that what you've described are all basically natural approaches. There's no prescription drugs involved here. There's no surgeries. There's no procedures. It's just taking a natural approach to helping someone get back into balance. It's just amazing.
And that's not an exception. I mean, that's the rule. Yes, there are times, very occasionally, but I would say probably, honestly, maybe 1 out of every 35 women do I actually get to the point where I'm putting on a hormone replacement, because if they're patient, these other therapies really do work. Not that the hormone replacement is, a major problem. It can be a benefit, but it's so nice if you can do it with even out that as a pharmaceutical.
And the irony is, historically, it was 1 out of 35 women who were not on the hormone replacement. Right? Is that just amazing how things have changed?
Well, we really know that they don't have the benefits that we thought they did. For women with severe symptoms, they can be helpful, and they can be helpful in preventing osteoporosis or helping to reverse some of the damage. But for the most part, they cause much more risk than they benefit in terms of cardiovascular and stroke. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, we're about running out of time here, and so I want to sort of get to closing. I wish we could go on for another few hours, but I think we both have to
We'd be in the dark.
And we have to take care of our kids too. So,
Yeah.
But before we close out, I just wondered if you could share with folks how people can find you or learn more about you in case they want to, get more information.
Absolutely. And the best way to reach me is through my website, and that's just avivaromm.com or www.avivaromm.com. And there's access there to reach me directly if people want to email me too. But there's so many resources and constantly growing courses and information for women on these various issues. And then if people want to set up an appointment with me, they can either reach me directly through my website. There's a link right over to the Ultra Wellness Center, or you can go to the Ultra Wellness Center. Just Google that; you can't miss it, and then you can set up an appointment.
You won't miss it. I guarantee
won't miss it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So before we go, whether on the topic of menopause or not, would you be willing to share some kind of either an inspirational message or some closing message to our audience of folks who are really eager to move in the right direction with their health and their lives?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So one of my favorite poets is a woman in her 80s, and her name is Mary Oliver. She's a stunning poet, and she has a poem in which one line says, "So tell me, what are you going to do with your one precious life?" And I love that. We get to this point in our lives when, we're approaching our 50s, or we're in our 50s or 60s or beyond. And I think it's such an important time to really ask ourselves, what do I really want? And if it's to feel well or to feel happy or to give more love or to change your weight, whatever that is, I think once you can identify what the goal is, then you can sort of start to reverse engineer, what are the physical steps that you need to do to get there? Right. And then what are maybe some of the mental or emotional blocks or obstacles that keep you from getting there? And if you can kind of keep your eyes on the prize of like, how do I want to feel? And then make every choice in your life toward that, right? Whether you're opening the freezer and reaching for the Ben & Jerry's pint of ice cream, like give yourself 5 seconds to just say, wait, how do I really want to feel right now? And that one question can just transform everything. How do I really want to feel right now?
It's a great advice. And let's all I wish everyone the strength to follow it. Since
it's a constant, we have to remind ourselves all the time.
We need the constant inspiration and constant messages like that. So that's great. So, we've come to the end of our time together. It's been fantastic. I think that the information you're sharing with us is going to be great. Everyone's really going to just eat it up. They're just going to love what you've had to say. It's really helpful. So I want to thank you very much for just taking the time. I know how busy you are. It took us a long time to plan this, so it means we're all really busy. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I love the name of the show. I think The Real Dose is just perfect.
Well, thanks again. So this is signing out. This is Dr. Steve Siskin from Real Dose Nutrition, and I want to wish everyone a healthy and great week and month, and may you have a lot of love and joy for yourself and with your families, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being with us today. Please join us next time on Real Dose Radio with Dr. Steve Siskind.